Breaking news overnight. The View co-host Whoopi Goldberg suspended for 2 weeks for her comments about the Holocaust.
Whoopi Goldberg's comments on the Holocaust landing her a 2-week suspension from The View.
I want to talk about Whoopi Goldberg because I got so many texts this week because she attacked me the week before.
Sure. Not going very well for the ladies at The View. Whoopi Goldberg.
He's suspending Whoopi Goldberg.
Yep. Whoopi Goldberg is in a whole lot of trouble.
Well, look, Whoopi Goldberg.
There's so many issues, and I'm a fan of Whoopi Goldberg.
Please welcome back to The Late Show, our friend and yours, Ms. Whoopi Goldberg.
Ben, I wanted to also get your thoughts on the other sort of cancel culture hot topic right now, which is Whoopi Goldberg's
Oh my God.
comment.
Okay. All right, my name is Ben Burgis. This is Give Them an Argument. I'm joined as always by the crew, our super producer, Jake Abbott, and our very talented graphic designer, J. Andrew World. How are you guys doing tonight?
We're doing good.
Yeah, we've got the hand science down, so.
Ready to talk 3 hours of Whoopi Goldberg. Let's go.
That's right. That's right. We are going to be doing nothing tonight except for Whoopi Goldberg. It's going to be Whoopi Goldberg for half an hour, just us. We're going to do Whoopi for an hour with Naomi Karavani. We're going to do half an hour of philosophy of Whoopi with Jenn. And then it's going to be Whoopi Goldberg for an hour in the postgame with Conan Neutron.
It's making Whoopi since, it's the postgame. we can get away with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Save it for the postgame or the censors are going to be on our ass.
Don't do, come on. Let's not have that on main. Jake, what's the deal with Whoopi Goldberg?
Yeah, so I'm going to be honest. I'm probably not following this as close as some people, but here's my understanding as a generally Jewish person who has to be aware of what happened. So for some reason on The View, they're talking about the Holocaust, right? Well, that's as it just comes up on The View, right? They're like, it's with my morning coffee. I want to hear these ladies talk about the Holocaust, right?
Sure.
So then, for some reason, she decided to make a very nuanced take in which she said the Holocaust isn't about race, right? Like basically, this is white people being evil to white people, right? Or man being evil to fellow man. So she got in a lot of hot water about that, and then. My understanding, what happened next, peters off a little bit, but as you saw in that super cut that I had the privilege of making, she went on Colbert and she kind of apologized, but also kind of doubled down. And it's this weird situation where it's kind of unclear what she means and why she's saying it, at least to me. But as you can see, it's been dominating the news cycle and it's the most important news story in the country.
Yeah.
All right.
I will say a little bit just to give Jake some context that Whoopi Goldberg this isn't the first time she's kind of said something strange about race. And she has a very unique perspective and this is a soft defense of her right now. Because I don't think she's right about the whole thing. However, she doesn't consider herself, for instance, as African-American, quote unquote. She considers herself Black because her heritage is from the islands and not from Africa. As she understands it. So like she's always saying, she has a very different perspective of how race works in and honestly I kind of get where she's kind of coming from in a way, because it was like there was no Israel, these were Europeans supposedly, but like that doesn't mean anything because you're not understanding the context of what happened and the 30s and 40s, and the rise of Hitler and all that kind of stuff. So
breaking
there ends my
news.
Soft defense there.
Breaking news: J. Andrew World suspended for 2 weeks from Ben Burgis.
Argument.
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to steel man her argument a bit.
No. That's fine.
No, that's totally fine. So I go back and forth between two approaches to things like this. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. In fact, I think I kind of tend to wildly vacillate back and forth between them. One of them is the one that's exemplified by my initial reaction when Crystal asked me about it on the show, which is, oh my God, why are we talking about this? Come on, right?
We're talking about Picard season 2, right?
Russia, Ukraine, that's still going on. Soaring economic inequality, that's still going on. It's just like, this is just silly. And then the other approach, which is exemplified by what we're about to watch, is trying to sort of find some kind of nugget of something that might actually be important that you could extract from like whatever like weird culture war, like freak out everybody's having about whatever they're having to freak out about, that week. And I don't know, maybe you have to do a little bit of both, but here's what I actually said to it after my sort of, initial cringing. And, when I was like, okay, fine, we can actually talk about it. Crystal had just taken us through the whole sequence of events that Jake just laid out. And then this was my actual response.
Sure. I find it really weird when liberals, progressives, sometimes even leftists get into these huge arguments about like exactly how we should think about race or all of these like sort of strange taxonomy questions, the sort of like, are Jews white people, are Spaniards POC, it's kind of like, okay, we do all remember that there's no such thing as race, right? That this is like pseudo-scientific.
Literally, yes. Literally, there's no such thing as race. That's right.
Yeah, literally, there's no such thing. I mean, this is like pseudo-scientific bullshit that was made up to justify slavery and colonialism, and there is like, this isn't like a meaningful biological category. It's not even really a meaningful, sociological category, because like you could say, sure, Black people in the United States disproportionately suffer from everything that's bad about contemporary capitalist society as part of the economic after effects of our system of apartheid up until the 60s. That's all true. But also, like, look, who's suffering more from all of those things, right? Like a very poor white person or Whoopi Goldberg, right? I mean, the question kind of answers itself, right? Like there are sociologically, no less than biologically, there are bigger differences within the so-called races than there are between them. So I just find this question of like, oh, that wasn't about race because like that's not a real racial difference, between white people and Black people. There are no real racial differences, right? I mean, there's like skin color difference or whatever, but like, if we had some weird classification scheme where we thought it said something really important about people, whether they had blue eyes or brown eyes, then like we could have all the same dumb discussions and, are green-eyed people, are those really blueies or brownies, right? But like, I don't think it would matter, and I don't think this matters either. I guess my main thoughts are, one, I will admit to feeling a little bit of schadenfreude because Whoopi Goldberg is exactly the sort of person who would go on about like toxic Bernie bros and shit like that. But then the other thought is that what I really get out of it, because I don't care that much about the underlying controversy itself, but I think the one kind of important thing for people to get out of it is that if you think liberals are way too censorious, which I do, that's kind of what we spent the first part talking about, you really shouldn't miss that any right-wingers who object to this are just being opportunists about this. The right is actually, I think, in some ways much more censorious. And so like,
true.
That's a great point.
So true.
Yeah. So, oh, sorry, please.
No, I was just.
Yes. So right after that cutoff, we kind of started going through a lot of the, what seemed to me to be the most obvious examples, like all of these McCarthyite laws to mandate firing teachers. My favorite one, by the way, that was recently introduced in New Hampshire. Apparently, New Hampshire already had a law in the books that was like left over from the McCarthy period about teachers who advocated communism, but the new anti-CRT law edits that to include communism, socialism, or Marxism to make sure that they have, all of their bases covered. That you can't be like, oh, no, I'm a Trotskyist. This doesn't apply to me. So that seems like an obvious case. The laws, Republican state legislatures to like legalize like running over protesters with your car seems like an obvious case. Crystal brought up the anti-BDS laws, which are actually like seem like a really extreme case to me because like protests don't get much more, placid and non-confrontational than just not buying stuff, right? So if the government is getting involved to try to penalize people for doing that, that's a pretty extreme case. So those are the things that I get out of the Whoopi Goldberg controversy that might actually matter, unlike most of it. That one, it's weird that we talk about, what objectively counts as a race, as if there were such a thing as objective race. And two, if nothing else, it certainly shows that right-wingers are being like crazy hypocritical about the free speech issue. I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely doesn't feel like the type of argument that like the longer we spend, the better it's going to get, right? In terms of like talking about like who's really, is Judaism a race? I mean, it's a complex issue if you're approaching it just from an educational standpoint, I think. But it's clearly, since like you said, these are all made up categories anyway, you're not going to come to a concrete answer, right? It just depends what perspective you're looking at. Again, as a Jew, it's not the type of thing where you see her talking and you're like, this is good. Like, I love where this is going. You know what I mean? But I always appreciate your pivot to like, okay, let's because free speech type stuff, I think, is something that usually a lot of these discussions, like I'm sure later in the show, again, in some of the Rogan stuff, it feels inane because you're like, I don't want to think about Whoopi Goldberg. I don't want to think about Joe Rogan. I don't want to think about these figures like ad nauseum. But the question of like how we as a society should deal with these questions is something that we probably should figure out for our movement, right? Like, that's an interesting question.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just going to say, with a name like Goldberg, you think she'd be a little more sensitive to the tribe.
Yeah, Goldberg in trouble for anti-Semitism. It's not a headline you see every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fair enough. So I should say we did get into the Rogan stuff earlier in the episode. I was kind of referring to it there. Overall, I think we'll wait until Naomi is on to get into that. I also wrote something for the Daily Beast about it, but I think that overall it was a great discussion. I mean, so you can find the whole thing. It's Crystal and Kyle and friends, and go to the Substack, or I think there's at least a clip of it, that made it onto the Breaking Points YouTube. But I was really happy about the discussion. I mean, the only thing I was unhappy about was that we were recording in the morning, and I had a cup of coffee with me. And I did not realize how good the new mic is at like picking up the sounds of me drinking coffee. It's like, oh crap. Okay. That I wasn't crazy about, but the actual.
Yeah, but I mean, they got to give, there's that commentary you were nice enough to respond to. You didn't need to dignify them the response for it. They were like, amazing content, but that terrible slurping. It's like, we're not all perfect, like. So well, you're always very nice when you get criticism, but I'm here to back you up. It's not your fault.
I appreciate that. But in any case, other than that, I feel very happy about how that went. I think it was a really good substantive discussion, both basically on, these kinds of weird controversies that we're obsessed with collectively for reasons that pass understanding, and also the free speech stuff, and also the Hitchens book, which quite a bit of it was spent talking about. Speaking of the Hitchens book, I should say that tomorrow at 7 British time, so 2 real time, and I don't know, 11, LA time, that the London Review of Books is doing an event because they just put out a collection of the stuff that Hitchens wrote for the LRB. So it's like basically a collection of pre-9/11 Hitchens essays called A Hitch in Time. So they're going to do like a Zoom event where we're going to talk about that book, and we're going to talk about my book. You can get tickets at Eventbrite. I actually don't think that that link is in the description yet, but it will be. It will be by the end of the episode tonight, I promise. So you should check that out. Speaking of tomorrow, later in the day, on the Callin show, the one and only, the great honky tonk socialist himself, David Griscom, is going to be joining me to take calls. So if you have the Callin app, come do that. But I guess last thing that I kind of want to do before we we bring Naomi on is just, look, okay, so my approach has been, generally speaking, the last week I've been kind of leading into the try to extract something that matters approach, but I also feel like there's definitely part of me that feels weird for like engaging with like whatever the fuck is going on with Whoopi Goldberg or Joe Rogan at all. Like, I don't really care that much about these people. It doesn't really seem like it should be on the top 500 priorities for anybody, you know. So I am going to feel bad about this if we don't spend just a minute talking about something that actually matters. So, Jake, a little while ago, we did a segment about the unionization efforts at Starbucks, and I think at that point there were like 3 stores that had filed for union recognition votes. What's it up to right now?
I actually have had trouble even keeping up. It's like what, like dozens? There's like dozens of stores all over the country that have filed for unionization, which is as someone who's worked on a similar kind of campaign where there's like brick and mortar stores all around the country, that is just like really unheard of, and I can't even think of, you know, a similar type of campaign. That's really wild how many stores have organized. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this just feels like something that people basically treated as if it were unorganizable until like essentially like last week, right? Like this is something that like everyone, you know, it feels like the kind of thing that, you know, in maybe like 2010 or something, you'd read about like the IWW as like organizing a coffee shop or bookstore somewhere, right? You know, but like in terms of any like serious effort, you know, to actually have like a collective bargaining process and all of that stuff, it just, there was just nothing. I mean, like, this is like, there's Starbucks everywhere, and the idea that any of them were going to be union shops, I think, would have just sounded kind of surreal, like in late 2021.
Right. Well, 2 quick things there is that there was the Fight for 15, right, which started as $15 and a union.
And a union, yeah.
But part of the criticism was like, well, what happened to the union part, right? But like, as we've seen, maybe these movements that don't immediately bear fruit, some of that effort, some of that energy could come later. Obviously, there's tons of historical reasons why it's finally popping off right now, right? And the second thing is that something like this has happened probably more recently, but not with this level of antagonism from the employer. That's what's so wild. You know, I mean, it's one thing if, you know, Starbucks and some union had some agreement where Starbucks was going to be neutral, where that could happen, right? And then you see a whole number of locations organized, but they're fighting this with, like, I saw this tweet that was like, you know, one lawyer that, like, the type of lawyer that they pay to union bust is equal to like something like, you know, like an entire year's worth of wages for one of their Starbucks employees. You know what I mean? It's like one day of these union busting lawyers. So it's pretty wild. So it's definitely really cool.
Yeah, I mean, like when they were organizing that first store in Buffalo, I remember we talked about this then, like the level of attention that got from the company was just crazy. That like, this is like one Starbucks, right? Not very many people work there. And there was this kind of national effort to stop them from voting in the union. They were like bringing in extra managers from other stores to like pull people aside for a little illegal, you know.
The CEO did a disastrous town hall, as we covered in the last labor segment, but they flew in the CEO. And the question always is why?
Also a botched Holocaust discussion, as I recall.
Maybe unless you're like, don't bring up the Holocaust unless you're like really ready to talk about the Holocaust with some sensitivity, because it's an easy subject to botch. People think it's like a famously easy thing to cover, you know. Maybe save it to like a 9-hour film like Shoah or something. But what I think that there's a lot of these questions, which is like, why would they spend so much money to stop 2 stores from organizing? And now you're seeing why. Because they know if we don't believe it, it shows how much they believe it, which is that if one store organized, then the whole fucking country could organize. And it's shame on us if we don't believe it. You know what I mean? Because they believe it clearly. And that's why they spend. If they thought that it was just going to stop at one store, they never would have spent that kind of money. So they know how a movement can catch fire.
Yeah, exactly. That is very well said. And this is like, look, I mean, if this is ultimately what we want to change the subject to, and it is what we should want to change the subject to, working class people actually organizing on the job, which I think we know is the only way that anything is ever going to change in a positive way, right? There aren't a lot of examples of like successful left political movements around the world that don't have, an organized working class as their base. Then, I don't know. If you just shit on stuff like this, like you might, you're just like, oh, this probably isn't going to work. I guess you get the whatever weird satisfaction you get from doing the, I guess I was right victory lap, when it fails, because most challenges to entrench power are defeated. That's kind of how that works, but not all of them. And if you are desperately trying to change the subject to this, it seems like maybe you should actually, hype this up, like show a little enthusiasm for a breakthrough like this. That would be my thought. But do we have, so I believe we have a clip from Redacted Tonight. So we're gonna watch that in just a second, and I will see Jake and Andy in the post game, where we are going to be joined by the one and only Conan Neutron, who I guess is going to try to mount some sort of defense of Aaron Sorkin. I guess we'll see how that goes. But that should be interesting. Remember, if you are a GTAA patron, you get that patron exclusive post game after every Monday night episode. You also get an extra episode a week at the Discord server and our undying love. So that's patreon.com/Ben Burgis. Just keep that in mind if you like the work that we do here. But with that said, should we do some sort of disclaimer about Russian state affiliated media? Is that how we're supposed to do this? If we
I forgot to check the memo.
we should, at the very least, that should be scrolling on the bottom, right?
I'm waiting for my check to clear from Russia and disinformation.
Putin is private.
No, I get mine directly in rubles. I think that's it's a little bit of a pain in the ass. You have to bring them to the bank and change them, and they never it's never exact. But I just feel more secure about it. No. Naomi does fantastic work. She is very funny, and this stuff is also really incisive. So we are going to watch a very small sample right now and then bring her on.
Nikola made its CEO, Trevor Milton, the richest Mormon in Utah with $34 billion that the company was valued at. They also won a $2 billion partnership with GM without even having a functioning vehicle. Though Milton promised they were making the most revolutionary hydrogen-powered semi-trucks, revolutionizing trucking, revolutionizing driving, and revolutionizing. Startup language. Instead, the Nikola truck was running on another renewable resource, gravity. Text messages from a former employee revealed Nikola had the truck towed to the top of a hill and simply filmed it rolling down the hill. Wow, I almost respect that scam. They should have named their company Newton. That would have been more accurate.
Yeah, that's my work. I did get a lot of hate for that segment online because, I started with talking about Tesla and how these other electric vehicle companies are taking Tesla's playbook, and, I asked for it. I should have expected that, but also, a lot of people thought it was just like a pro fossil fuel segment too. But really, that's
so weird, right? Because it's like, okay, do you think that electric cars are going to be a magical exception to how everybody else who's trying to profiteer off some weird startup does it? This is what they all do. This is this could be I'm not against blood testing, but that doesn't mean we can't make fun of Elizabeth Holmes.
Yeah. And I'm sure one day there will be a great at-home blood test. Then we'll have to just go through a few more scams before we just discover that. But it's just the way the economy is run on nothing, and we're just gonna see so many companies make nothing and just make tons of money because they know how to play the stock market. And really what I was going after in that segment was SPACs, the special acquisition companies that were special purpose acquisition companies that are kind of a new kind of merger that helps companies basically skip all the regulatory junk they have to do and get like straight onto the stock market and merge with a legit company. So you have a lot of electric vehicle companies, like Nikola wasn't the only one. There's a lot that just don't make any cars, and we need electric vehicles. So that was the point.
It makes it like the fact that we clearly need electric vehicles, because all of the reasons that we desperately need to transition away from fossil fuels is what makes this so bad, right? I mean, like, if it's the same way that, like, that really would, like, save many people's lives if there was this simple home blood testing, kit, which is what makes it so bad that Elizabeth Holmes did what she did, right? I mean, if she was, claiming that she had like a revolutionary new kind of bubble gum, it would just be funny that she had like defrauded all of these rich people and war criminals out of their money. But like, because she's actually...
especially Henry Kissinger. We were all like rooting for her at some points. SPACs were really what I was taking aim at. And I do think that the tide is turning a little bit, but not people hear the word, I think, and not a lot of people are talking about it, especially, I feel like in leftist publications, they don't get to, what's the word? Just like in depth with financial stuff, and I think it's really important. And right now we just don't have any regulation of it other than short sellers like Hindenburg Research that put out this. They're just like, this is a good company to bet against because their cards run on gravity. So get it on it now. Hopefully that'll change.
Yeah, I mean that just sounds like I don't even know, like that's like if like there was like an "I think you should leave" gag where like somebody had like a fake electric car startup, that would be the punchline, that they just like towed it to the top of a hill and rolled it down because they couldn't think of any other way.
And Trevor Milton is like a really funny character because all of the videos you watch him, he's just like, I swear to God, it's not a pusher, and which is like a car that you would, because people are suspicious of this because he's making all kinds of promises. He's like, I'm the first hydrogen-powered car. It's like, really? We thought that technology was so far away, but this guy figured it out, and he is just. I mean, the level of, and he's had many different scams. But this is really the best work, his best work. And I mean, now he's answering to the SEC for it, but it is.
Yeah. And I think there is like a serious thing here also just about, like, I think there's an economic inequality angle to stuff like this, because if you had to, like, if you said, I have this amazing, idea for, like a hydrogen powered car, an amazing revolutionary home blood testing kit or whatever, and you had to apply for like, I don't know, research grants from the government or like even loans from like normal private banks, then you'd be going through layers of like bureaucracy. There would be people who'd be asking a lot of questions about how it was supposed to work, before they put, whereas like if you have some people just like sitting on these giant piles of money as individuals who aren't accountable to anything, to anyone, then like you could just, like all you need is like a good axe. And like, they might have somebody that, like, if they're cautious, they might have somebody who has to approve it, but like otherwise they could just write a check.
Yeah, you can just like have a monkey driving a rickshaw in the back of a truck, and pickup trucks. A lot of fake pickup trucks are coming out right now. People want something that they can imagine themselves drive drunk in. That's what America wants right now. And electric pickup trucks will be. Then we will fully transition. But yeah, there was another point I wanted to make. oh no, I forgot it. I did want to, I know it's like almost so over, but the Whoopi Goldberg thing, I was watching you guys talk about it, and I'm sorry for anybody who's so done with it, but it is funny that for a split second when she was like, this is not, the Holocaust was not about race, before she goes into the Jews are not a race. I was like, for a second, I was like, oh, maybe she's gonna bring up like Hannah Arendt and like actually it's about alienation, or like bring up like recent Holocaust historical studies like that show, oh, actually institutions have something to do with it, the level at which the government there were some kind of institutions, and Timothy Snyder's argument, but or
like go into some like hardcore Marxist, like, look, we can't just talk about race here. Like, this happened because the material conditions in, Germany in the 1920s.
Yeah, I was like, all right, The View, let's do this. And then it was just like, obviously, then the things that came out of her mouth, it was just like, obviously, she didn't read any of the history. And it was a little disappointing for me.
It feels like she like has some like half memory of something in school or something she saw on TV that used the phrase man's inhumanity to man, and like that's what stuck. But like otherwise, what she's got is like, no, that's not a race. We all know that like race objectively means whether you look white or you look black. Which was
and as a Jew, I'm excited to talk about it. So I mean,
are you so your position, just to be clear, is that it for sure is a race, that you're objectively POC?
I don't know. I guess like, so obviously you're not asking me that question seriously.
I'm not seriously asking you that question. I think it's incredibly stupid that anybody is like asking questions like that as if there's some like objective answer, that it's not just like all kind of nonsense, that it's like
on the other hand, people don't know that there are a lot of brown Jews, and like racist Israeli society is, and all the German Jews are in the parliament. It's not an accident, it's by design.
Right. Yeah, sure. It is real Knesset. Right. So you've got Jew on Jew racism, but that's I don't know how that fits with Whoopi's categorization scheme.
It gets way too complicated for where that discussion was going. I don't know why I expected something to come out of that, but I also think that a lot of people are taking it out of context, because she was arguing for Mouse to be not considered a CRT thing, right? A critical race thing. So she's arguing for the CRT idiots, right? And then she starts to explain herself. So I feel like she backed herself into a weird corner and started, talking out of her ass.
No, that makes sense. I mean, it's kind of funny, because I think if you actually look at those like school board minutes for that place that was taking Mouse off the reading list or out of the library or whatever it was they were doing, it seems like, okay, these people are idiots. It's extremely gross. They're not like Holocaust deniers. It's just that like, oh, this is upsetting, so so people shouldn't read it. And also, it seems like it is like a weird right-wing version of the whole context doesn't matter thing, that like, hey, if there's anything in Mouse that like any character says anything, motivated by strong feelings about genocide, that like a kid in the high school would get in trouble if they said, then therefore nobody should read it, like as if as if it doesn't matter at all, like what the context is in the story or anything like that. Like all that matters is the actual, it's like, oh, see, on page 154, one of the mice swore. So, obviously we can't do that.
Yeah, and it's different species you're talking about when it comes to mouse, because you have so many, it's the cats and the dogs and the mice. I mean,
okay, it's been a long time since I read mouse. I remember the Jews were mice and the Germans were cats. I don't think I remember the dogs.
Yeah, maybe it's also been a long time for me, but it is in my bathroom. So I've banned books in my bathroom.
Nice.
That's
nice.
how.
I like it. I like it. So while we're on these subjects, I do want to talk about the other one for a minute, right? So I wrote this article for the Daily Beast about the Rogan thing, and
Yeah, but that was pre N-word, right?
yes, that was pre
You're
that was
right.
pre N-word. Obviously that changes everything. This is definitely the thing that the fact that Joe Rogan said the N-word while quoting things that other comedians had said or quoting rap lyrics 10 years ago is definitely the top thing.
I don't care. I mean, I don't.
Everybody in the country should be talking about that for as long as at all possible. That's like, it's like a little weird. Like it feels very cynical to me that like, okay, wait a second. So we just spent the week talking about Rogan for this unrelated thing. And now that started to die down. And since like we can never have enough Joe Rogan discourse, like that has to just keep going forever.
I'm sure it's great for his bottom line. I mean,
no, I think it's fantastic for his bottom line. I mean, if he gets to dominate the news cycle for like 3 weeks, I mean, like that's if somebody wants to get mad at me for 3 weeks, like, I think for the sake of the channel, that'd be fantastic. But
yeah, you just need like a controversy that doesn't get you it's like right at the cusp of canceling where you just like,
don't actually get kicked off of YouTube, but there's like just enough
I made a joke about pedophilia, but it was,
yeah, I mean, it's weird. Like, I mean, look, my very boring take is that like white guys shouldn't say the N-word. I think it's like kind of dumb and tone deaf at best, but also it is a little weird to claim that context doesn't matter. It's also a little weird to pretend that like norms haven't shifted on this, right? Like that there wasn't like, I remember 2010, it was not that uncommon, right, for like white comedians, like in the course of like making some point about it, like, Louis C.K. back when all the liberals loved him, like did this whole riff about why, he, it's like how is horrible when, what did he say? Some white lady on TV with nice hair, says the N-word, and that's just like a way of saying, and then he actually says the word is because come on, you're making me think, and then that's the word, that's what saying a word is, right? That you make it in my head, and that's what you're doing, And it was like kind of funny, but it's like also like nobody cared about that at the time. Right?
And then there was like a point in time where you couldn't say the ER, but you could say that.
The hard R was the line, that's the point of principle. That yeah, right. So it's like, so on like before that, right, people were talking about the vaccine stuff, which of course is a much better objection to Rogan than that he was like tone deaf about quoting 10 years ago, because like I think some of the people he's had on are really bad on that, right? That they really do like peddle total nonsense on that, and he shouldn't do that, and I think it's good to like do. I mean, we don't really do it on this show because I know that I just don't know that much about this stuff. All I really have to say is like, I don't know. I'm not an epidemiologist. Like I gotta trust the people who are.
Like, how deep do you want to get into this science of myocarditis or what? It's impressive he knew that word, but
yeah, right. No, exactly. Although it is also pretty significant in terms of what I was writing about, which is the censorship angle that people who do that, right? Who do like deep dive, like debunking videos on YouTube, they're constantly being yanked off or demonetized or deleted because the algorithms are stupid and they can't differentiate between like sane a combination of words because
Yeah.
you're like saying that it's true and saying the same combination of words because you're like explaining why it's false.
Yeah, that's why. That's why a lot of people are like, yeah, let's talk more about the algorithm and what kind of content is being pushed towards people. But Joe Rogan, he's just so popular. It's you're fighting, like, if you deplatform him from Spotify, like, he's just gonna, first of all, be available on all platforms, and then you're gonna have like a different campaign to get him off of Podbean and like all these other apps. And it just, yeah, it's a stupid conversation to have. And I totally agree with your article, but it's just like so many people dismiss these arguments.
They do. Yeah.
You say corporate censorship and they're like, oh, well, that doesn't exist.
Yeah, which if you're a libertarian, I understand that because you think that like all oppression has to come from the government or it doesn't count. But like if you're a leftist and you think that like private corporations actually have all sorts of, objectionable power over us, then I don't really understand the like there's no such thing as private censorship argument at all. And I guess my big thing is it's like, okay, look, whatever you think about Rogan, and I don't actually care very much what anybody thinks about him. He's like primarily an entertainer. If you actually watch that show, like all of the guests.
Yeah, I've tried. I've really, I mean, it's like, I love comedy. I love comedians. I've tried to watch, I watched the episode with Eddie Izzard and I was like, wow, it is amazing that Joe Rogan can make Eddie Izzard boring. Like after hour 2, you're just like, oh my God, I can't do it. And I don't want to be like, I'm going to defend the guy who said the N-word. I'm just going to say that he does platform a lot of artists and he does do a great job with the comedy community. And,
and I will also say, right, so like, I think that people who only know, I mean, I used to like, there was a point when like I'd go on a run and like anything I normally listen to, like you have to think about too much to like listen to while you're running. So I'd like listen to Rogan on that, right? Like, and so
yeah,
I listened to like a little bit
your episodes are pretty long too. If you could listen to your own show.
There you go. Yeah. So we are editing the podcast version a little bit more now, so it's not quite the.
Oh no, I like the long one.
Okay.
I mean, think of Dan, or you have Dan Carlin. I guess that's the only.
Oh yeah, no, I actually did listen to a little bit of Dan Carlin a long time ago. I haven't listened to it in a while, but yeah, I mean, I think if you actually like watch and listen to the show, political guests are actually like a pretty small minority. Like usually it's like comedians or actors or MMA fighters or somebody who thinks that I don't know, like dropping LSD every morning is going to cure cancer or whatever, right? That they and the Mayans figured that out, but like. And then, like, out of the political guests, I think it's a little bit complicated because I think it does skew right because I think that he tends to invite people on he thinks are interested or somehow anti-establishment. I think sometimes he has a very skewed sense of that. And also who don't, like, actively dislike him, which also skews right? But also... I do think like under something that people aren't appreciating maybe as much as they might is that a lot of leftists who can't get anywhere near like who are never ever going to be on any like normal like media outlet he will have on and
like Abby Martin.
Yeah, exactly. Abby Martin like will come on and like talk about what's going on in Gaza, and that is something that like I understand that if you're in the world of like watching shows like this or whatever, they have a like, you think, oh yeah, lots of people do that. But it's like, no, nobody does that on any kind of scale that is like anywhere in the same conversation as how many people listen to this. So I do think that is like a consideration that it's like, okay, so you're shutting up the bad, like if somehow magically, right, you were kicked off Spotify, which isn't going to happen anyway, and you were kicked off Podbean and whatever, that like, okay, so you're shutting down the bad people who are saying dangerous things, but you're also making it like that much harder for for anything to the left of the kind of corporate centrist like media blob to get out there. But also, like, okay, even if you think on balance, because he will have people on who say ridiculous things about vaccines, and sometimes he's, backtracked or corrected himself or tweeted out people's, corrections of him or whatever. But like, you could say, no, the thing itself, might do much more harm than, that all that does good. And, whatever. I guess the big thing I would just urge people to think about is if we're talking about, like, okay, we're going to kick off Joe Rogan Institute, like new rules about misinformation. That's not only going to, like, that's not going to be a Joe Rogan only rule, right? In fact, any new rules that get implemented are probably going to apply much less to people who, like, make tons of money on the platform than they're going to apply to everybody else. And look, the question I was asked, like, okay, I mean, imagine a world where there were like podcasts in 2002 and there was Spotify in 2002. Like, who do you think would get, like, the boot for misinformation? People who said that the New York Times was right and the government was right, that there really were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, or people who said that Bush administration officials were conspiring to lie to us about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So,
Yeah.
I do want to just really quickly though, before we move on to things other than Joe Rogan discourse.
It is really hard to pay attention to him for 2 weeks. It's like,
that's a little.
And I feel like I have to be an expert. I should go back. I should listen to Joe Rogan.
But there's so much of it, and every episode is 3 hours long. Like, how much time are you going to spend doing this? Which is why nobody actually does that. Everybody just has like 30-second clips of one direction or another, they like or hate. But I did think that there was something interesting that is sufficiently on brand for this show that I think we should do before we leave the subject behind. So a little while ago, there was this clip that was going around of Joe Rogan talking about paternity leave. Did you watch this? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, good. That's very good. You should be like not like hyper aware of all of this nonsense when it's happening. But even though you were nice enough to come on the show, I'm going to subject you to it. So let's watch that clip.
A highlight I can do. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'm questioning who do you believe should pay for something like that?
I don't know, but if I was an employer and I had a guy who worked for me, who wanted to take 3 months off because his wife gave birth, I'd be like, "What the fuck are you talking about, Mike?"
Even to support his wife?
You give birth to support his wife while I pay him for free. Do you understand that this is kind of most people when this happens? If they make enough money, the wife will not work and the father will work.
Right.
And then the wife takes care of the child. And this is normal.
Yeah.
And then the dad provides support when he comes home. If you're saying that the man and the woman should both get like 3 months off, this is a new thing.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's not new in Europe, but
we're not in Europe. This is better. This is America.
Yeah. No lunchtime either. That's a European thing. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. No, absolutely. These are the top things that make me proud of America. That we don't have paid paternity leave. People can't take as many breaks. They don't get vacations to spend time with their families. These things all make me feel very proud.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you have that clip where Rogan is saying something really stupid. He's taking a right-wing position. We shouldn't have paid paternity leave. He's making a terrible argument for it. And so at the time that this happened,
you'd think he would be like for more benefits for men if he's like in the MRA sphere a little bit. Like, men don't get anything. I mean, they get nothing on divorces. Like, this is at least get a few days off if you have a child. Like, yeah, it seems inconsistent.
Yeah, he's letting all the bros down. When this came out, like, there are like 20 like left-wing shows that I follow, that like at least to see the tweets and that the titles of videos and stuff that came out with videos dunking on this. You can see why, right? It's he's taking a bad position, and even if he's being a little playful about it at the end, like, it's like look, if that's your best defense, right? You know, that this isn't Europe. Like clearly, you've taken a really bad position. But so I can understand why. But I also found it really interesting. So on that episode of Crystal and Kyle and Friends I was on over the weekend, actually before I came on, I watched. I mean, I don't actually especially like watching myself after the fact, but I did watch the stuff leading up to me being on again after. And there was this point where Kyle Kalinske tells a story about that exact clip, and I found this really interesting.
So I'm gonna tell a private story now.
Okay.
And I think people will like this story. So it wasn't that long ago, maybe a month or two ago, where Joe got in some trouble he was in a conversation with, I forget who it was, but he argued, Bridget Fetisi, maybe it was?
Yeah.
He argued against paid paternity leave.
Yes.
And he did it pretty glibly, and he took a stance. It was very like, this is what I think about this. I don't like it, right? And so you and I saw that clip.
Mm-hmm.
I did not agree with him at all. So we decided, coming in to do this show, let's cover that in the intro. I want to play that clip, and I want to respond to it. And what did I do? Pulled up all the different graphs. Here's paid time off. Here's how much other countries get. Here's how much we get. We're at the bottom of the barrel. You know, we're like the only developed country that doesn't get paid time off, doesn't get paid maternity leave, doesn't get paid paternity leave, and workers are getting screwed in that sense. I was very clear when we did that segment to lead with, look, Joe Rogan's an honest guy. Joe Rogan's a nice guy. He's got a lot of views that are left that he never gets credit for. But then whenever he says anything right-wing, people always pounce on him.
Right.
So you lead with that. Then I made the argument. Did you know Joe watched that video? And then him and I were texting about it about a week later. And in a very long and detailed text conversation, he said in no uncertain terms, you convinced me. You changed my mind. I didn't know the stuff that you showed. And when I was talking on the podcast, I was just talking to another comedian, sort of talking shit, talking off the cuff. And I said something that now in retrospect, having learned more about it, I was wrong. And in fact, he even supports policies that go way further than that.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I support a 4-day work week. And he was like, I do too. It's like, well, that's way more time off than just paid paternity leave. You're like cutting down the work week so much when you do the math on how many weeks there are and like all the extra days you're getting off. UBI.
Yeah.
Because there was another thing that we were discussing about unemployment, and he was like, well, what if people are like sort of gaming the system a little bit? This is standard right-wing concern. I don't know who we heard it from, Ben Shapiro, Stephen Crowder, somebody like that, right?
Crenshaw.
And I was like, Joe, I support universal basic income. I want everybody to get like $1,000 or $2,000 a month. And he's like, I support that too. So it's like, so you support a policy even to the left of just unemployment. And he's like, yeah, I guess I do. And so now the next time paid paternity leave or paid time off comes up, Joe's going to argue in favor of those things.
Yeah.
That's not possible if he's a dishonest actor, if he's a complete ideologue. And also, it wouldn't have been possible if you and I didn't believe in the power of persuasion.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, and by the way, I saw some of the comments on our video of the Joe Rogan one. A lot of them were very fair, very, very good.
Yeah.
But then there were some that were like, look at this, he's going soft on his friend Joe Rogan. Look at him. He won't even do the thing where you're like, what? But not only did what we do work, it worked perfectly. Perfectly. Now,
Whereas
look,
if you come in and you're like, this guy's evil and he's bad and let's censor him, like how much is anyone, Joe Rogan or anyone else, going to listen to you when you're just like out to attack their character and destroy them?
Yeah. Some people in the chat are asking, wait, was Joe Rogan sarcastic from the beginning? And I don't think he was. I think he was being really sincere, and he's constantly opening up about what he thinks. He's really an open book. And I do think that, yeah, that clip that went around of him talking about myocarditis, this thing with COVID, that clip that went around was showing him like looking at different evidence he hasn't seen before and then making up his mind. And yeah, you just don't see that from most people. And definitely not. I mean, is anybody doing that on Twitter? Like that barely happens, you know?
No, exactly. And I think that's on the sarcasm issue, I think in his, like the bulk of the clip, when he's talking about why he doesn't support paid paternity leave, that's not sarcastic. I mean, that he's definitely saying what he really means. when he's sort of flippantly saying, "Yeah, this is America, baby," like that. Okay, sure, he's like fucking around a little bit, like at that point in the clip, you know. But
and
like,
also, he is talking about a case where he's the boss and he would be paying for it. So I think he's like, "Yeah, I'd support it on a national scale, but not in my business," you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, you know, I don't know. I think he. I think at this point the show's popular enough, you know. I mean,
Yeah, he can now he can afford it for sure. If he's not giving his workers paternity leave,
yeah, he should see.
Definitely, that should be the next scandal.
Yeah, yeah.
Next week.
Yes. Next week, if the N-word thing starts to die down and we need to do another week of Rogan discourse, we can move on to that. But yeah,
I don't know. The N-word could last a long time.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I don't know. But I think the thing you said about, like, you don't see a lot of that on Twitter, I mean, it's kind of the point for me, because look, are there people who nothing you say or do or like will ever convince them? Of course there are, right? There are people who are like super hardcore ideologues and they're married to their positions and nothing you say is going to change them. There are people whose like interests are too like aligned with like bad stuff to listen to anything you have to say, right? There's no argument you can give Jeff Bezos to turn Amazon into a worker co-op or something. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But like most ordinary people, right? Like if you have, you know, like a cousin who's a Republican or something, right? Like it just like applying this model to them, right? Assuming that everybody's like the most hardcore version of the opposition just seems super counterproductive to me. And I don't like, I think that like, yeah, when you do the Twitter thing and essentially you yell at people that they're fascists, like, I don't know, it doesn't really seem like that brings a lot of people around, as far as I can tell. And so it seems like, you know, maybe apologies in advance for putting it this way, but like, you know, maybe it's a lot better that like Kyle, you know, gave him an argument.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And I think that, you know, he knows he's dumb, and that is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's Socrates, right? I know that I know nothing.
Yeah, so, show me the charts, you know. I'll look at them.
Yeah. A comparison people make frequently, right? Joe Rogan, Socrates. That's you know, that's in the dialogue, right? You know, it's like, you know, Euthyphro says the holy is that which gods love. Socrates says, Jamie, can we pull that up? Right? I want to see if the holy is that which the gods love. Yeah. Okay. Well, in that same spirit, and in the spirit of subjecting people who are kind enough to come onto the show to horrendous material. We have, I think, since there's another one we want to do in a more complete way, I think this we're just going to do a minute of, but some, you know, we're going to look at some arguments for the other direction, you know, like really think about them. So this one is from a university. It's an online university. It's I think it's named after the founder. So Jake, do we have PragerU on why on how
I love PragerU
on how you should judge America?
The left and the right view America and its history very differently. Conservatives view America as President Abraham Lincoln viewed it, as the last best hope of Earth. While acknowledging America's flaws, conservatives regard America as the best society ever created, giving more people of more backgrounds, more freedom, more opportunity, and more affluence than any other society, and doing more good for more people in other countries than any society in history. The left, on the other hand, sees America as having been and continuing to be a very flawed country, morally no better than many and morally inferior to many. The left's view is that America was founded by rich white males who were intent on protecting their race, their wealth, and in many cases, their slaves. America was and remains sexist, intolerant, xenophobic, and bigoted. a country of unacceptable material inequality where the super rich and big corporations have far too much power and influence.
Oh man, it's
what a crazy thing for the left to say.
Yeah, it's like going back to Lincoln. First of all, everybody's like confused that Lincoln was a Republican. It's just like if Lincoln lived today, he would be a Democrat probably, and nobody would. Yeah, no right-wing source is going to explain why that is. But it does scare me how they have a pretty good graphic designer, and they're going to convince a lot of people with these flying words and illustrations. And yeah, sometimes I come across PragerU videos and I'm like, the beginning makes sense, and then it just like goes off the deep end.
Yeah, I also like, okay, I mean, some of the stuff that they said that the left thinks, it's like, I mean, I guess, you could say, I mean, I don't think there's anything that was listed off that you could possibly argue like isn't still like a problem at all, right? It's like, yeah, we solved sexism, that's over now, right? So, but like, especially the thing about like, okay, first that the left says that America was founded by rich white men who wanted to protect their privilege and their power, and in many cases, their slaves. Help me out here. Like, the way he was saying it suggested that that's wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't know why it's wrong. Like these people weren't slaveholders, or they didn't, like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, like I was a high school history teacher. So it's like, for me, we, do this, there's like a lesson that we're definitely going to do about the Declaration of Independence, the paragraph that was removed about slavery. Mm-hmm. Like every high schooler knows that. Like, it's not a question that, so yeah. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson wanted to say that slavery would be abolished in the United States. And he was against the king supporting the market of slaves. So it's just,
yeah, why was that taken
wrong.
out? Like, that's, I mean, the actual Jefferson paragraph was a little bit like, okay, wait a second, you're gonna like blame the king, like the English made us do this, right? But like whatever, like
of course, being idealistic, but
like put that aside, right? Like why is that out? I mean, like, this is, to be clear, like, I mean, if all he's talking about is like the 1619 Project View, that's like why the American Revolution happened, okay, that's wrong. But like, clearly the left in general doesn't think that, right? Clearly the things that like people with vaguely progressive views who might count as the left for the purposes of a PragerU tirade, like, clearly what they just think is that, like, yeah, the people who, had power in early America clearly were slaveholders, and they, like in lots of cases, and clearly were very interested in keeping their slaves. I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, I was never a high school history teacher, but like, I seem to recall that like several decades after that, like there were still a bunch of them who were like super committed to keeping their slaves, and that was like a whole thing in the 1860s. That they were willing to fight to keep their slaves. So I
know that much.
I vaguely remember 1861, 1865. There was some stuff about people wanting to keep slaves. So again, I don't understand why that's wrong.
I guess, okay, so can we take their perspective for a minute and say, okay, these kids, they're going to learn nothing good about America. They're going to hate America. They're going to want to like start Chaz in every city and, burn the police departments down. If we don't teach them that Thomas Jefferson was a good guy, like, I don't think that's going to happen. And
probably not even your students started at Chaz.
No, they didn't. And plus, like, that was also, I wasn't I mean, I guess maybe I spent a lot of time on lefty stuff. I'm like, another article from Emma Goldman won't hurt anybody, but the New York State curriculum was just like, it was pretty lefty. I mean, they had like excerpts from Howard Zinn in the test. I was like, yes. So.
All right. So you were in the place where they were actually doing the critical race.
Yeah, this is I was their nightmare for sure. But I even if if you're critical of a history, first of all, I think it just gives you a sense of identity to even know the critical parts of your history. So it is like a net positive in a way. You're like, yeah, America's fucked up. We can bond over that,
Yeah. And then at the end of the video, at the end of the part of the video we watched, he says that the left says that America is this really unequal society where the super rich like have this huge share of wealth. And again, does he have some like stats to show that that's not as true as we think it is? Like I didn't see him in there, right? Like it just sort of seems like the tones is disapproving, but like, is this not true that the super rich have this like huge share of society's resources? I'm pretty sure that is true.
Yeah, I guess the PragerU thing is just to say like lefties believe, and then true fact, and then
and the true fact, like they didn't even bother denying the rest of it. They just said, "Ooh, this crazy leftists believe this." But the true fact they gave at the end was that, okay, one, America is like the best country in the history of anything ever, and I'm not sure how we're measuring that, but like, I mean, I grew up by the Canadian border. I could like rattle off some ways in which that seems better to me, but also, okay, we can argue about that one, and I think some of that's kind of funny because it's like, I've never really understood the whole, like, I'm so patriotic, I don't want to improve my society in any way or make it better for people who live here than it already is. We're done, like that seems weird, right? But like, okay, we can argue about that, but then like the United States has done more good for people around
the world. Yeah,
can we take a global opinion poll on that one?
Where to begin with that? I mean, you could start with the Philippines. They, we fought alongside them against the Spanish, and then they had to fight another war of independence against us. So it's just, our body count is so high around the world. It's just,
yeah, right. Like, I mean, I guess it would be useful, like in that part of the video, all we saw was this sort of wave going around. Like, I don't know, it looked like it was going into Europe and Asia. It's like, I don't know which countries we're talking about here.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the Marshall Plan. I mean, we did have like a brief moment where we were working towards development, but also at the same time, like we were helping Nazis after the war, and we were destabilizing a lot of countries. So yeah, I don't know what version of history like you're expected to give. I can't even imagine the textbook you would give to these children. What would you learn about the Cold War? Like, what would you would you just skip Vietnam? Like, what are you going to do?
Right. Well, that's the thing, because like you can talk about, the Marshall Plan, fair enough, and I guess, they'd say, oh, well, okay, sure. So we were like, helping Nazis escape from, justice after World War II so they could help us in the Cold War. And yeah, okay, I guess that's bad. But like, we defeated the Nazis, although that's, like if we're going to play that game, like, okay, so the Soviet Union also did like tons of good for the world then, right?
Yeah.
Doing its part of that. So yeah, that just seems very seems very strange to me. But I want to be fair. They were that we watched just a minute of that one, and they were going through a lot very quickly. So I want to see the deeper dive to see when they just pick on one thing and really make their argument. So Jake, do we have the other PragerU vid?
One of the most important differences between the left and the right is how each regards the role and the size of the government. The left believes that the state should be the most powerful force in society. Among many other things, the government should be in control of educating every child, should provide all health care, and should regulate often to the minutest detail how businesses conduct their business. In Germany, for instance, the government legislates the time of day stores have to close. In short, there should
okay. Let's pause. Let's pause on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of local governments that liquor stores are heavily legislated in the U.S. Right? You can't get beer after 10 p.m. in some towns. I don't know.
Yeah, right. I mean, that is a place where the U.S. definitely does that, and in that case, it always feels a little obnoxious to me because it's sort of it's we don't think that you should be drinking right now, so nobody's allowed to sell you alcohol. But also I don't know if the government mandates what time of day things have to be closed. I mean, I worked at a couple of grocery stores in the past. That sounds kind of nice to me. I don't hate that idea.
I don't see how this is a net bad. I guess if you're a business that you want to be an all-night supermarket and it's tough in Germany, I don't know where he's going with it. It's not a strong point for me. If I'm trying to imagine myself my politics are flexible and I'm watching this, I'm like, all right, stores closed.
Yeah. That's and again, if you're a worker, then it's so there's especially if I'm not going to have to be pressured into doing overtime past a certain time, again, that doesn't. I mean, sure, I like the convenience of all night stores, but this doesn't sound too tyrannical to me yet. And says his other examples are the left wants free healthcare, which is horrible, as we all know, but also that leftists believe that the government should be responsible for educating every child, which is the government, public schools in the United States, do have a legal obligation to educate every child. I mean, unless their parents would educate them somewhere else, they have to do that. And I mean, that seems like a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. I think they're just trying to sound spooky, like it's a horror movie, the left believes that there is a government and you're supposed to think oh no, we should get rid of it. What?
Yes, exactly. Okay, let's keep going.
Government, not parents, not businesses, not private schools, not religious institutions, not even the individual human conscience. Conservatives, on the other hand, believe the government's role in society should be limited to absolute necessities, such as national defense, and to being the resource of last resort to help citizens who cannot be helped by family, by community, or by religious and secular charities.
Okay,
conservatives understand.
Let's just pause. Okay, so in his vision of what would be an acceptable welfare state, according to Dennis Prager, in order to qualify for government assistance, I mean, I don't want to be uncharitable here, but I think this is what I just heard. You have to, I assume, prove to someone that you have no family who could help you, that there's no church that would do anything to help you. That sounds wow. I mean, I like how many how many steps do we have to go through before you actually get help in this scenario?
Yeah, exactly. And what was that thing about the conscience. He believes that the left doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, right. No, fair enough.
This
So
is the guy who's in charge of this too.
Yeah, no,
this is the best we're getting.
Yeah, this is Dennis Prager, right? It's Prager University. You know, this is like I mean, if you have a whole university named after you, it seems like you should be able to do better than this. But it seems like he wants to make like really, really sure that absolutely nobody is getting any kind of government aid if they possibly have any sort of other option at all, right? That like that's like what we should really like if we're thinking about how government social services should work. Like the main, and this is, whatever. It's not like unique to Dennis Prager. This is like what conservatives in general kind of think. This is like what neoliberal Democrats kind of think. I remember in 2016, Hillary Clinton doing this like an applause line in a debate that she doesn't want to pay for Donald Trump's kids' college. That like so nobody's which I'm sure they would go to public college, whatever. But like nobody should get it. Like the thing that we should be worried about is that somebody who doesn't really deserve it might be getting government aid.
Yeah, exactly. I did a story recently on Redacted about how there's a lot of states that are taking federal aid and just storing it away. Like they would rather hold on to it. It's aid that's meant like to aid for welfare, basically. And all of this money, there's like billions of dollars sitting in state coffers that they would just rather have sit there than actually help people. And so it is a really poisonous way of looking at things. And there are some states who actually redirect that money to, like child protective services. So if maybe the mom can't get financial help from the government, but if she's in a bad place, they can take her kid away and So they solve your problem somehow,
Yeah.
And so it is. It's scarier than like the actual what happens in practice is like scarier than making fun of this this Dennis Prager guy right now. Even though like. Yeah, I would want stronger arguments if I were working for PragerU.
Yes. Come on, this is,
but yeah, the result is really ridiculous, and they work against themselves.
Yeah, yeah. YouTube isn't. I expect better from a YouTube university, but
yes.
Yeah, I guess like the one serious point I make about this is it's just like this obsession with making sure that like we're really, really sure that everybody has absolutely no other options. Like one, I think from a personal freedom perspective is terrible because like if you have family members who could help you if they chose to, or if you have a church that could help you if they chose to, and that you could only get some sort of help, from society as a whole, if you've shown that you don't have these options, then any strings they want to attach to that help, they can attach, right? I mean, they really have you under their power, right?
Yeah. Actually, in Utah, the Mormon Church does. They do actually deal with a lot of giving out welfare, and they do tie a lot of strings to it. You gotta, I guess, pretend you're Mormon for a little bit in order to get welfare in Utah.
Yeah, right. I mean, and I'm sure, like, again, it doesn't exactly stretch imagination to see a religious organization saying, like, okay, well, you're about to be evicted, pay your rent, but like no living with somebody out of wedlock, or like whatever, right? Like that.
Yeah.
So like that's one thing, that like you have. Like just in terms of like if you care not about like people's freedom to keep every cent in their bank account, but like about their freedom to like actually decide how they would live their lives, then that's like awful. If everything's like means tested at all, never mind to the degree that he wants it to be. But then also, like, I don't know, I mean, aren't conservatives supposed to be super concerned about bureaucracy? Like, if you have all of these layers of, okay, nobody can get help, if there's any possibility that they could like find a church that's willing to help them, if they have family who are willing to help them, this has to be the last resort. Like, you have to have a bunch of bureaucrats.
Yeah. Is there a fountain with pennies in it in your local town? Have you tried OnlyFans? Like.
Yeah, no,
you
exactly.
Have to prove it.
And this sounds like we're giving a lot of power to government bureaucrats here. If they're like, if they're like scrutinizing your case to see if you tried the pennies in the fountain first, to decide whether or not you merit help. I mean, that sounds like a much more powerful government bureaucracy than if you just like have a legal right to, healthcare, education, whatever, just for being a person. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to prove anything.
Yeah, I don't think they thought through the bureaucracy thing, honestly.
All right, let's keep watching.
That as governments grow in size and power, the following will inevitably happen. 1, there will be ever-increasing amounts of corruption. Power and money breed corruption. People in government will sell government influence for personal and political gain, and people outside government will seek to buy influence and favors. In Africa and Latin America, government corruption has been the single biggest factor holding nations back from progressing. 2, individual liberty will decline. With a few exceptions, such as an unrestricted right to abortion, individual liberty is less important to the left than to the right. This is neither an opinion nor a criticism. It is simple logic. The more control the government has over people's lives, the less liberty people have. 3, countries with ever-expanding governments will either reduce the size of their government or eventually collapse economically. Every welfare state ultimately becomes a Ponzi scheme, relying on new payers to pay previous payers. And when it runs out of the new payers, the scheme collapses. All the welfare states of the world, including wealthy European countries, are already experiencing this problem to varying degrees. 4,
to varying degrees.
In order to pay for an ever-expanding government, taxes are constantly increased. But at a given level of taxation, the society's wealth producers will either stop working, work less, hire fewer people, or move their business out of the state or out of the country. 5, big government produces big deficits and ever-increasing and ultimately unsustainable debt. This, too, is only logical. The more money the state hands out, the more money people will demand from the state. No recipient of free money has ever said, "Thank you, I have enough." Unless big governments get smaller, they will all eventually collapse under their own weight, with terrible consequences socially as well as economically. 6, the bigger the government, the greater the opportunities for doing great evil. The 20th century was the most murderous century in recorded history. And who did all this killing? Big governments. Evil individuals without power can do only so much harm. But when evil individuals take control of a big government, the amount of harm they can do is essentially unlimited. The right fears big government. The left fears big business. But Coca-Cola can't break into your house or confiscate your wealth. Only big government can do that. As irresponsible as any big business has ever been, It is only big government that can build concentration camps and commit genocide. 7, big government eats away at the moral character of a nation. People no longer take care of other people. After all, they know the government will do that. That's why Americans give far more of their money and volunteer far more of their time to charity than do Europeans at the same economic level. Without the belief in an ever-expanding government, there is no left. Without a belief in limited government, there is no right. I'm Dennis Prager. To subscribe...
Yeah. I can't believe he's president. I don't know. They didn't have a better guy. I mean, it's interesting that we brought up I brought up earlier in the talk when we were talking about Whoopi, we were talking about the Holocaust and how there's an argument that racism doesn't change outcomes for Jews during the Holocaust, but that actually institutions, if there are a lack of institutions, you're more likely to die in the Holocaust. So we've already disproved his argument in so many ways.
Well, I will say that the Coca-Cola can breaking into your house was a nice visual touch. That was fun.
Yeah.
Or I guess the Coca-Cola can knock on the door and didn't actually get into the house.
Yeah, but if you also think of there are plenty of private companies who seize their resources, and you have a lot of gunboat diplomacy it's just he's overlooking history. It's just I can pick of all these things that you have gunboat diplomacy that would on behalf of American banks try to shoot their way to get their money in the Caribbean and South America. You have the banana plantations that are guarded by the military. It's obviously wrong.
Yeah, I mean, also I point out that Coca-Cola is a fun example because in the 90s and early 2000s, they were repeatedly accused of hiring death squads to kill union organizers in Colombia. That we could have done an image where the Coca-Cola can had a gun.
His arms. No, it's got a can opener and
Yeah, no, exactly. And it just seems I think all of the examples you're giving, right? But that's government. It's okay, sure. But I don't think Dennis Prager is endorsing anarchism, right? We agree that there's going to be a government of some sort or another, right? So given that, right, is the thing that you should worry about that it's going to that you're going to get the taxes are going to be too high because you're going to be paid for for social services, or God forbid a big business gets nationalized or something, or is the thing that you should be worried about that governments are going to act on behalf of big business and do all of these things that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean the Coke can knocking on your door is definitely an image that will stay with me and haunt me. Going back to how PragerU will. But we talked about, the fact that he was Ponzi, the government is just a giant Ponzi scheme. It's what is the stock market then? And how are you explaining that there are all these fake businesses making billions of dollars right now? So
yeah, it's a funny claim, right? The Ponzi scheme thing, because it's well, okay, but wait a second. So, an actual Ponzi scheme, you have to, sell something to people who sell things, things to people who sell things, like crypto. But but if you just have a welfare state, then ideally universal social programs, right? Everybody pays into it and everybody also benefits from it. That seems that I'm I'm not really getting where the Ponzi scheme thing comes in, except of course that Dennis Prager's imagination, the way that this would play out, is that everybody just like decides to stop working, because you can
it's just not true. There's been studies where people have a universal basic income, and it's like, oh no, kids actually stop working and go to school. That's what they do. People have time to make their lives better. It's like
but you don't get this like huge uptick and like people just like it just people being what's the phrase neat, right? Not in employment, education, or training. Like I don't think any of these experiments in UBI you get that, and certainly just in like regular social democratic welfare states like Swedes and Norwegians, as far as I've ever heard, like still have jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, but think about how well their prisoners are living and the IKEA furniture that they have. They're so comfortable. And
that definitely
that mass shooter is like playing Nintendo all day.
Yeah, that definitely does piss me off when I think about that, because it's like, my God, right? Like Anders Breivik gets a Nintendo and he'll get out of prison someday. And that should make all of us angry, because like, obviously Norway would be better off if they had what we had here, which is like tons of poverty.
You lock up Anders Breivik and his mother and his cousins. Anybody he's ever talked to, his Facebook friends.
Yeah, and that's why there's so much less violent crime in the United States than there is in Norway. I mean, like, I don't think you can like step outside at night in Oslo without like drive-by shootings happening. I'm sure because their like criminal justice system is so lenient. Or maybe it's
that hardcore Norwegian rap that comes out.
See, I've heard of hardcore Norwegian, like death metal. It was a black metal, right? That I've heard of. I'm not familiar with Norwegian rap. Maybe somebody could send me some of that.
It exists, but it's probably like more upbeat.
I'm sure that's true. Yeah, but I don't know. It seems like maybe if you have like strong unions in a big welfare state, then like you can actually have like a really lenient criminal justice system by American standards, but also not very much violent crime, which, like, again, I know we're supposed to think that America is the greatest country in the history of countries and anything ever that's ever existed in any species, any galaxy, that, nothing will ever be better than America. But like on the face of it, that does sound better than this to me.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, he's really making an argument for the left, I think.
I think so. All right, Naomi, where can people find your stuff?
Well, you can check out my clips on Redacted Tonight, youtube.com/Redacted Tonight. They also have another app that's called Portable, where you can get all the full episodes if that's what you're into. But yeah, I'm on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Naomi Karavani.
Nice. All right. Awesome talking to you. Definitely have to come back soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's the fan to guest pipeline.
Excellent. That is one of my favorite pipelines. And if you've got to have pipelines, then I'll take that over Keystone or any of those other ones. So I'm happy to hear that. So Naomi Karavani, check out all of her stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So we are going to play a quick preview of the patron bonus episode. So this came out for GTAA patrons on Saturday. There have actually been 2 patron bonus episodes since the last normal episode that we did, because we ended up having to take last Monday off. So there was one with Jesse Spafford where we talked about G.A. Cohen's argument for socialism and some of the objections to it and how some of those objections can be countered. And then the one that we're about to watch a preview from was the one that came out on Saturday. So this is me, Ryan Lake, Matt McManus, and Russell Sabriglia talking about a right-wing article that's, I'm actually not sure which part of the episode this comes from, but the main sort of thing the episode was about is that since it checks too many, I know it was a while ago, but it checked too many boxes for us not to do an episode about it. We finally got deep into that Discourse magazine article claiming that Kant is the source of wokeness. So here's that clip.
All right. I am now joined, your patron, who these people are, Matt McManus and Russ Sabriglia, who are back with me. They were both participants in our previous discussions about Kant and Kantianism. And there's something that came out a little while ago, but we've been meaning for some time to cover this because this just seems like a little bit too perfect and we can't not. This is an article in something called Discourse magazine, which is called "Was Kant the First Woke Philosopher?" And apparently their answer is yes.
Now, if I understand it, Discourse magazine is the one that's set up by James Lindsay, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is an interesting connection, yeah.
Huh. Yeah, so that doesn't surprise me then, because of course they would argue that.
Well, it is kind of funny, talking about Lindsay, that when you think about, this conservative objection to wokeness or whatever they're talking about when they talk about wokeness, which is often confusing to me because, like, all right, so there's this like prehistory of like, there's a certain kind of like black radical usage of the word woke in like the 90s that, I think like has largely been forgotten by people of all races. But like more recently, it always, like, up until about a year ago, I thought I knew what woke meant. And like, I still sometimes do, like it's very speaker dependent and context dependent, because like usually what I thought that meant was like that you have like a certain kind of rhetorical posturing about social justice that tends to be very disconnected from any kind of analysis of material conditions and tends to be very focused on what language people use and policing individual morality and stuff like that, in which case, like, yeah, okay, that sucks. But now it sort of seems like conservatives, your James Lindsay's and for that matter, your Ted Cruz's, just sort of use it to mean stuff they don't like in general.
Yeah, well, it's not the first time that's happened, right? We can all remember back in what seems like decades ago, but really 25 years, postmodern neo-Marxism was the neologism that was just creeping up everywhere. That never really seemed to catch on. Maybe there are too many syllables, so just labeling everything woke at least has a kind of elegance to it in a simplified sense, I guess.
All right.
What up?
You can check out that entire episode and every other Saturday Patron episode, and also the Patron exclusive post games on Monday nights.
My bags look weird.
And footage of Jenn worried about her bags. And all sorts of other stuff. If you join the Patreon, patreon.com/Ben Burgis. Most importantly, you have our appreciation because, if you like what we're doing, then this is the,
What's up, Andrea?
This is a good way
Andrea.
to support it. It's all of those benefits are just kind of a way of saying thank you, but really it's a gesture of solidarity. If you like what we do, help us keep doing it. All right, that pitch out of the way. Let's get to the fun part.
Oh, my bangs are good. All right.
All right. Outstanding. So we have done various things on the philosophy segments in the past, but I don't think we've gotten very much in these philosophy segments to arguments for the existence of God, which of course is something that, yeah, right. See, this is like a classical thing. This is what, Thomas Aquinas and Ansel,
Tommy,
Descartes, like all these people, like they spent their time doing it. So we've got a clip of a couple of the great minds of our era being asked how they could prove the existence of God. And
at the $20 level, you get something special.
$20 level, you can watch me fret with my bags. So, all right. So, again, I think we can all agree the two most important intellects, actually the three, this because all three of them are in conversation here. The three most important thinkers of our era are Dave Rubin, Ben Shapiro, and Jordan Peterson.
Well, I don't know who doesn't agree with that.
I can't imagine anybody not agree with it.
That was clear from that video.
Well, let's
clear.
let's show the nice people what we're talking about. So Dave Rubin has asked Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro essentially to give him an argument for the existence of God.
Danny, we're not even talking about Kant.
Are you getting Kant puns in the chat?
I am.
So here is Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson explaining their best arguments for the existence of a creator.
But, well, here's one selection mechanism. It's like, so human females are very sexually selective. That's why you have twice as many female ancestors as male ancestors. So the male failure rate for reproduction is twice that of the females. Okay, so the question is, well, how is it that males succeed differentially? And the first answer is, well, females reject. Human females reject. But then the question might be, well, they reject on the basis of what? And the answer is, well, it's something like competence. And then the question is, well, how is competence defined? And then the answer to that is, well, men put themselves in hierarchies and they vote on each other's competence. And it's really counterintuitive in some sense from an evolutionary perspective, because you'd have to ask yourself, why would men put themselves in positions where they elevate some men in status and then give them a huge reproductive advantage, given that that's to their reproductive disadvantage in some sense? Okay, and there are reasons. Part of that might be, well, let's say you decide to follow the best leader in a battle. Well, then you don't die. Like, he might get all the women, but you don't die, so at least you're still in the game. And it might be the same if you're following the greatest hunter. And the greatest hunter wouldn't be the person who is best at bringing down the game. It would be the person who is best at bringing down the game and sharing it and organizing the next hunt and all of that, right? And so men will organize themselves into groups and privilege certain men, and that puts them ahead in the reproductive hierarchy. And so what that means to some degree is that there's a spirit of masculinity that's shaping the entire structure of human evolutionary history. That's what that means. And then I think, okay, well, that might just be a biological epiphenomenon. And so it would be a spirit it's the spirit of positive masculinity that manifests itself across epochal ages, millions of years perhaps. And it actually has shaped our consciousness, actually. And so you can think about that as a figure. And it would be the figure that emerges. It's like the essential spirit of all the great men who defined what greatness constituted. That's a spirit. Okay, now that's a purely biological explanation. You could say, well, that's God for all intents and purposes. You might have an image of that built right into you. Even the sense that you can experience something divine and paternal might be merely a reflection of that evolutionary process. So that would be a biologically reductive argument for the existence of what we experience as God. But then there's another possibility too, which is that that's actually reflective of a deeper metaphysical reality that has to do with the nature of consciousness itself. And I would say that I think that's true. I believe the biological case, and I believe the biologically reductive case, but I don't think that exhausts it. I think that there's a metaphysical layer underneath that the biology is a genuine reflection of. And that's the sort of the macrocosm above and the microcosm below. That we are really reflective, including in our consciousness, of something about the structure of reality itself. And that might involve whatever it is that God is.
Well, so that's why I think this is so interesting, because what you're doing there, especially at the end, is you're giving it a little room to say, I don't know, right?
Well, you have to.
Yeah, but I think that's what people don't want to grant you.
Well, this is why I don't like the question. Do you believe in God? Right. It's like, well, to me, that question is always like, well, what makes you so sure that you know that God exists? And it's like, well, I'm not sure. I'm not willing to claim that certainty, but Well, but I laid out the argument. I don't
Right.
know what you think.
So what do you think about when he takes it all the way to that end, and then there's that little space at the end?
I mean, again, I don't think that that's severely problematic in terms of just general religious thought. I mean, the general religious thought going back thousands of years, and this is why when you look at Aquinas' proofs of God, what he comes to is he says basically what you say, which is if you go down deep enough, then you get to something. And that something is what we call God.
What?
One thing I really enjoyed.
My head hurts now.
Yeah, this is what, your like third time watching that?
And it makes no more sense now than it did the second or the first time.
Yeah. Exactly. Leave that one up.
I want to know how we have twice as many female ancestors as male.
Or I think it was the other way around, but whatever. It's like either way.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Either way, I would think it would be 50-50. Like, just, from what I understand about, like, unless some of these were, virgin births, like, I just.
At least, biologically speaking, maybe these are transgender female identifying.
I am fairly certain that is
people.
not what Jordan Peterson means.
And
I'm just going to take a stand here and say that's not what he's talking about. But I guess my favorite.
Trying to use some interpretive charity here.
Yeah,
it's
but
hard.
He's
hard
not,
to make it work.
Yeah.
Antonio. Yeah, Antonio. Antonia.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That wasn't the Antonio I was talking about. The progressive view of gender.
Right. Well, I don't think Jordan Peterson is known for his progressive view of gender.
People can change.
Perhaps. So I would think that would have been more of a news item if he had changed his mind about that. But yeah, it's a weird it's a weird claim, and I think that actually John, if God asked me, right, as the atheist, if God hypothetically existed, do you think it would be a good thing or a bad thing? Yeah,
Charlie Kirk asked you that.
Charlie Kirk asked that exact question in our debate. I'll say what I said to him, which is it kind of depends. Like, you'd have to fill out some details for me, right? Like, if
that
I
makes sense.
Like, are we talking about a God who would send me to hell for not believing in him? In which case, I think that would be very bad news for me if that God existed. And then he was like. And then he was like, exactly. And then Charlie was like, oh, well, okay, but just assume that you're going to heaven. Like, and then I was like, okay, I mean, I guess that would be good. I don't know what this is supposed to prove, but like, sure, sign me up, Like, I don't like the idea of not existing one day. I'm not, I'm all for eternal life. If that's, if it's good eternal life, and if that's that's one of the options.
Jay Hutch, I don't know who you are, but you're one of my favorite people. I just want to say that.
Yeah. So I think one of my favorite things about that clip, having seen it a few times also, is that Ben Shapiro, who I think I'm very on record as not being a fan of Ben Shapiro. See the cover of my first book, for example.
Drawn by Ryan Lake. That's right.
But man, in this particular room, Ben Shapiro looks like Kant, right? I mean, like he's so much more coherent than anybody else at that table. And I like the fact that Shapiro is essentially doing the thing that good classroom teachers do in like intro to philosophy classes.
I was doing that today because we were talking about Kant today.
Where like, and I'm not saying all or even most intro students are like this, but there are some, the type, they like where some student will just like babble just this stream of like nonsense. And the thing that you learn to do, right, if you're a good classroom teacher, is instead of being like, wait, what?
What did you just say?
I don't understand what any of that means, dude. instead of doing that, which would just shut down the conversation, what you do is you translate it into something in the neighborhood that actually makes sense. So, you know, like what's the closest thing that like would be a coherent thought to
So what I'm getting from this
yeah. Okay. So I think what you're saying is, and then like they're so confused they're not even going to recognize that what you said is not at all what they said.
or they'll say something and then they'll be like, did that make sense? And then I can just be like, no, can you try again? But most of the time they aren't aware that they aren't making sense.
Yeah.
But,
well, so
you gotta, you know, kind of tweak it a little bit for them.
Yeah. Like they probably know that like it's a little bit jumbled or whatever. So they'll be happy to latch on to anything that's kind of sort of like what
That's
they
what
said.
I said. That's what I meant.
Yeah. So that's what Shapiro is doing at the end, right? Because it's like Peterson just went on like just 2 minutes of just like, I don't even know what you
word salad.
Like 2 minutes of word salad. And it's like, here are a bunch of like vague claims about evolution and something about the masculine spirit or the, you know, spirit of manhood or something. And then like, okay, he sort of realized that he hadn't said anything that would be an argument for the existence of God. And so he says, but there's like a metaphysical thing underlying that. I was like, okay. So, and then Shapiro says, essentially what Shapiro did at the end is, okay, so I think what I'm hearing is you're just giving me Thomas Aquinas's first cause argument for the existence of God, which I'm going to say right now is not what Jordan Peterson was doing over the course of those 2 minutes. I heard nothing.
It would have never occurred to me. I mean, props to Ben Shapiro there, because I could have never done anything but stare blankly at that. That would have been anybody else want to respond to that? Anybody, you know, want to respond to Jordan there? Please.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because like, yeah, that's what like Shapiro has been like, okay, so this sounds to me like Thomas Aquinas saying that if you trace everything back, there has to be some sort of, you know, first cause of everything. And it's like, okay.
And that is what we call God.
Yes.
I mean, that's literally what he said.
No, that's the. I don't know why that was so funny.
Yeah,
I
mean, it is funny. I'm just saying that.
Yeah. No, those are literally the words that came out of his mouth. But it's like, clearly, that's not what Jordan Peterson just said, right? I mean, like, there's no place in like Thomas Aquinas where he's like, I don't know. So like there's evolution and there's the hunters and, you know, the mightiest hunter, you know, is like, maybe, I don't know, maybe you like share
if you follow the best warrior into battle, he takes all the women, but you get to live. What? And we have twice as many female ancestors.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would just be like you think that like there are like ancient super studs who are, you know, that they like that they have they're getting
like
around.
The high school quarterback.
Yes, that the quarterback is, you know, the Neolithic quarterback is like half of our ancestor. You know, so half of us have that guy as our ancestor. You know, I mean, you know, I guess it's possible. I'd like to see some citations, but. Yeah, and I do also think like, yeah, somebody brought up and Antonio said that is Aquinas. So Aquinas is who Shapiro referenced there, I think, right? Like, did he say his name? I don't know. I got lost in a lot of what was going on there. For some reason, I thought I heard Aquinas' name in there somewhere. And Aquinas does, you know, how many ways are there? Is like five. The 5 ways, like one of them is basically the first, you know, one of them is the first cause argument, right? That every effect has to have a cause, and you have to be able to trace the causes.
And you can't go at an infinite regress, so there has to be something that is a cause but is itself uncaused, and this is what we call God.
Right. Not that I think Aquinas uses that phrase, but yeah, that's the.
No, it is.
Oh, it is. It is.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And this, I think it's, and
that.
this we call God.
Oh, and this. Okay, yeah. There we go. That sounds more like quiet. Yeah. Yeah, fair
Sorry,
enough.
I didn't have Aquinas's perfect wording there, but
Okay, well,
yes.
in the
And
future,
this we call God.
in the future, before
Yeah,
we
yeah,
do a segment
yeah.
on GTA, memorize everything that Thomas Aquinas said.
Check.
So, yeah, it's like Aquinas or Descartes or any of these people. None of them say, St. Augustine. None of them say anything that's anything like what Jordan Peterson said in those 2 minutes, or anything that has any kind of family resemblance to anything that Jordan Peterson said in those 2 minutes. That is all him. I did an interview with Robert Wright for Blogging Heads about my book, and we went back and forth for a while about whether Christopher Hitchens was particularly significant, because did he have really new ideas? I was like, I don't know. Do you have to have really new ideas to be an interesting writer?
How many new ideas are there? Really?
Well, I think we just heard one.
Oh.
I don't think it was a new good idea. But whatever Peterson was saying, I am pretty sure that's all him. That's he's not repeating something he heard someone else say. That is an original Jordan Peterson thought. So if that is the standard of philosophical greatness, then
I wonder if he could come up with that again.
Right? If you just asked him now, Dr. Peterson, why do you believe in God? Can you take me through it? if what came out of his mouth would be those same 2 minutes again, or whether he just come up with some entirely new riff the second time. All right, well.
And these we call a God.
Is that the way that Thomas Aquinas said it?
Look, J. Hutch wanted it. J. Hutch gets it.
Oh, he requested in that accent.
Yeah.
There we go. Quote Aquinas in an era specific Italian accent. I like it. Yeah, exactly. Somebody should make an NFT of this. Everybody can own Jordan Peterson's rambling explanation of evolutionary biology, gender, and why that somehow shows that there's a God. Because it's normally, if I heard somebody say what Shapiro said at the end there, normally I want to argue with them and be like, well, hold on, but why does this first cause get to exist without a cause and whatever? But in context,
because it's the first cause.
Well, okay, but I mean, whatever was the first cause, could just be the physical universe, that the Big Bang singularity is the first cause. But in context, I guess listening to all of that just kind of kicked in, the part of myself, I think that just sort of kicked my brain into the context of oh, we're clearly teaching an intro class right now. And man, that is the star student, right? I mean, he's doing so good right now. That was a coherent argument. I understood what he said. I understood what he was saying. Dave and Jordan, I didn't really get where that was just babbling nothing, But
that's where you grab Ben by the arm as everybody's, and you're like, thank you, thank you for that.
Yeah, exactly. So we Ben Shapiro is one of my least favorite people, but we believe in giving credit where credit is due on this show. And credit is definitely due to him in that conversation. Now, on the subject of the new thought haver, since Jordan Peterson has a new book, and I think he's actually started to, I don't know, he might have had to cancel because of Omicron, but he'd at least announced that he was going to do a tour for his new book.
We're not going to have to go see him, are we?
And so I wrote a book. I wrote a chapter of it, but I co-wrote a book with Matt McManus, Marion Trejo McManus, and Conrad Hamilton, called Myth and Mayhem, a leftist critique of Jordan Peterson, a couple of years ago. And Matt thought that now that, our boy Jordan is making the rounds again, we should revisit the topic. So there's going to be no show next Monday because of the holiday. But
what holiday is that, dear?
I don't know. It's Arbor Day or something. But
it's not funny. We're going to 7-Eleven.
I guess I had that coming. So yes, no show on February 14th because of whatever's going on then. But we will be back on the 21st, and we are going to do that episode all about Jordan Peterson with Matt and Marianne and Conrad. Should be a good time. Conrad is in France, so he's stayed up till ridiculously late in his time zone to be part of this discussion. I am really looking forward to it. Meanwhile, we're going to go to our post game with Conan Neutron, where we're going to talk about Aaron Sorkin, and Andy, I think, is going to talk about how mad he is that Conan made him watch Aaron Sorkin's movie, The American President. So it should be a fun time.
You know, this reminds me, Colin Cowherd said something the other day, and I can't remember what he was talking about, but he said to never underestimate the value of being surrounded by mediocrity.
Yeah. I mean, I've never been so impressed with Ben Shapiro. So if you are a GTAA patron, you should already have the link for the post game. If you're not one yet, then
why not?
Why not? You should get on that. But meanwhile, I will, if you are a patron.
He was not, Danny.
Meanwhile, if you are a patron, I will see you over in the post game with Jake and Andy and Conan Neutron, and it should be
Hey, Jay Andrew.
A very good time.
I am now on my way to the airport to pick up my mom. Team Snoopy forever.
Left is best.